Welcome to the deep dive. Really glad you could join us. If you're here, you're serious about boosting your knowledge, which is great, and we're definitely here to help with that. Before we dive in, though, just a quick but really important note. We need you, our listeners, to help us grow. Please make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Daily Colloquial English. It's essential if you want more of this kind of quick, deep learning content. Yeah, just hit subscribe, maybe like this. Share it with your friends. Anyone you know who loves getting into the details of language. Helps us a lot. Okay, so let's get into it. This deep dive, it's about something, well, tiny, but really powerful in English. The suffix "n." How do we take a quality, like something being dark, or maybe a concept like strength, and just bang, turn it into an action?
Exactly. That's the focus. Our source material today really drills down on mastering this little mechanism. It might seem like a minor point, but honestly, knowing how and when to use "on" properly, it's a fantastic shortcut to more precise and concise language. So yeah, our mission today is to quickly nail down the function, the meaning, the patterns, basically how to make these specific verbs work for you.
All right, let's start right at the core then, the basic mechanism. You mentioned its function is pretty uniform. How would you define that? What's the sort of fundamental rule here?
Well, what's really neat and kind of rare in English is how consistent it is. This suffix "n", it gets attached to certain base words, sometimes they're adjectives, sometimes nouns, and it forms a verb. And here's the key insight. That new verb pretty much always carries this idea of causing something or transforming something. It means to make or to become, whatever the base word is.
Right, to make or become. That's the absolute core takeaway then. It takes a static description, a state, and turns it into a dynamic action. It's the difference between just describing something passively, versus actively making a change happen. Like you said, the room is dark. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
But if you say the clouds darken the sky, well, that's an active process, isn't it? Making it dark.
Precisely. And the power of that shift from state to action shouldn't be underestimated. When you look at the examples in the sources, you see how these on verbs really cut down on extra words. Instead of saying, "we need to make the bridge strong," you just say, "we need to strengthen the bridge." It gives you conciseness, clarity right away.
Okay, so this structure seems to give us two main ways it works, depending on what kind of word we start with, right? Let's break down that first pathway, starting with an adjective and turning it into a verb.
Yeah, this is probably the most straightforward use. You take an adjective, which describes a quality, and you add "n" to make it an action that causes that quality. The meaning pattern here is really consistently to cause to become the adjective.
And we see this one all over the place in everyday English. Let's maybe run through some key examples from the source material, because they make it so clear. Like, if something is wide, you widen it. You cause it to become wide. If a skirt is too long, you shorten it. You cause it to become short.
Exactly. And it seems particularly common with adjectives describing sort of basic, measurable, physical qualities. Think about sensory words, too. If we take soft, we get soften. And that's important because saying to soften just sounds, well, more elegant than to make soft, usually. And the list goes on. Bright becomes brighten. Deep becomes deepen.
Right. And crucially, this transformation often acts on something, doesn't it? It's transitive. Like the example, the tailor will shorten the dress. The dress is the object being changed. But it can also be intransitive, just describing a change in state, like his face will redden or the plot will thicken.
Absolutely. The suffix is flexible there. In that second case, like the sky will darken, the subject itself is undergoing the change. It's becoming dark. This sort of dual potential, meaning either to make X or to become S, that's what makes "n" such a linguistic workhorse. It captures both sides of the change, the cause and the effect, often in just one word.
Okay, that makes sense for adjectives. Now let's shift gears to the second category highlighted in the sources, adding "n" to nouns. When we start with a noun, a concept, or a thing, the action feels a little different, maybe, even if it's still about causing something.
That's a good point. It is slightly different because nouns often represent something maybe more abstract or a state of being rather than just a simple physical quality. So when we make a verb from a noun using "n", the meaning often shifts subtly towards something like to give the noun or perhaps to cause a related state.
Let's use that common example again. Strength, that's a noun. So to strengthen something is quite literally to give it strength.
Exactly. Or think about the name fright. Fright is, a state of fear. So to frighten someone means you're actively causing them to enter that state. You're inducing fear. The verb neatly packages that whole complex idea of causing a psychological reaction.
I find this group really interesting because it often does seem to connect to more abstract ideas or impact. We mentioned length becoming lengthen, making something longer, but then you have threat, the noun threat. To threaten someone means to communicate or give a threat.
Right, or consider a slightly older one, the noun heart. Historically, to hearten someone meant to give them heart, to encourage them. The verb captures that direct action of imparting an emotional state. So it's not just physical changes, it's causing mental or emotional states too. Like the example, the workers will strengthen the bridge, they give it integrity. Or the loud noise might frighten the baby, causing that state of fear. It's like linguistic shorthand for influence.
Okay, so we've got the basic rules. Adjective plus on means make become adjective. Noun plus on means give noun or cause state. Seems straightforward enough, but this is where it gets tricky, right? Because if it's so useful, why don't we just slap "an" onto every adjective and noun we feel like? Now we're getting into the nuances, the exceptions, the limitations, and the source material definitely warns us about just going wild with it.
Yes, absolutely. The sources are very clear on this. You can't just apply this rule universally. There are definite constraints, morphological ones, historical ones, even phonetic ones that limit its use.
Okay, can you unpack the morphological constraint first? Why can't I take, say, the adjective happy and following the make X rule, tell someone to go happen their mood? I mean, happen exists, but
Yeah. Right, but it's a completely different word. Happen actually comes from an Old Norse root meaning something like chance or occur. The fact that it ends in "n" is purely coincidental. It has nothing to do with this verb-forming suffix we're talking about. And that's the first big caution flag for you, the learner.
Yeah.
Just because a word ends in "n" doesn't automatically mean it was formed this way. You have to check the root.
Got it. So check the history. What about words that don't have a similar sounding verb already? Why can't I say beautiful on my house or intelligent my argument? Those seem like useful actions.
Now you're hitting on the phonetic and maybe historical constraints. Generally speaking, the words that most readily accept this on suffix tend to be shorter, often monosyllabic, maybe dissyllabic at most. And frequently, they are native English words, often relating to basic physical or sensory qualities. Think deep, wide, short, soft. Longer words, especially those polysyllabic ones, often borrowed from Latin or French, like beautiful or intelligent, they don't really take this Germanic on ending. To an English speaker's ear, beautiful, efficient sounds kind of clunky, awkward. We tend to reach for other tools like the suffix to suffix beautify, or we just use a phrasal construction, make beautiful.
Okay, so that's a really key point. We're mostly talking about a native English process, usually applied to native English roots. So the takeaway for the listener is, if your base word feels long, or maybe highly abstract or comes from Latin, this on suffix is probably not the right tool. You wouldn't try to complexen something, you'd complicate it or make it complex. You don't sadden someone, you just sadden them, which is already a verb. Wait, no, sad is the adjective. You make them sad. Or you could say the news saddens them. That one works.
Sadden does work, that's a good example. But calm is already a verb, so you don't need calm-in. It's tricky. Another nuance the sources bring up is formality. Some of these on verbs just feel a bit more formal, maybe more literary than using a simpler phrase.
Can you give an example? I mean, I'd say tighten my shoelaces without thinking twice.
Yeah.
That feels pretty normal. What about ones that feel more elevated?
Okay, think about embolden. It's a great verb. Means to make bold or to give courage. Now, you could say the general's speech made the soldiers bold, but using embolden the speech emboldened the soldiers, it just elevates the language slightly, doesn't it? Or consider fasten. We use it all the time, like fasten your seatbelt, but it still feels a touch more formal than maybe just buckle up or secure it. The N can sometimes add a sense of completeness or official action.
I definitely see that. It's the difference between saying the new evidence will strengthen the case versus the new evidence will make the case strong. The first one sounds more concise, more professional. The second is a bit clunky.
Exactly. And choosing that on verb often signals a greater command of the vocabulary, maybe aiming for a higher register. Which is important if you're aiming for precise professional communication. Look at that company example we talked about. The company hopes to soften its image. Using soften there is very deliberate. It's concise, sounds professional, and implies a kind of strategic effort to reduce any perceived harshness. Much better than make its image softer.
This also makes me wonder about redundancy, though. We know shorten is efficient, but for some ideas, the in suffix feels almost optional now. Like, take the adjective red. We have the verb redden, but honestly, how often do you hear it? We usually just say turn red or make red. Why do some stick around and become essential, like widen, while others like redden fade a bit?
That's a really interesting point about usage frequency and maybe necessity. I think the in-on verbs that remain really common and essential are the ones where the alternative phrase like make wide or make deep feels genuinely awkward or inefficient. Redden exists, sure, and it means to become red, but its use often feels a bit more specific now, perhaps more literary, like his face reddened with shame. For just everyday color change, yeah, turn red works fine. But for fundamental changes in dimension or state, like widen, deepen, strengthen, shorten, those inverbs are just too useful, too active and precise to easily replace.
Okay, so usage seems to be driven by a mix of things. Historical convention, whether the base word fits phonetically, usually short, native words, and just sheer linguistic efficiency. Does the end verb offer a clearly better, tighter way to say it compared to the longer phrase?
That sums it up nicely, I think. If make X feels clumsy and often steps in beautifully. If the base word is too long or from the wrong origin, or maybe if a perfectly good simple verb already exists, we tend to avoid forming a new end verb. It's a simple system, really, but layered with complex history and usage patterns.
All right, let's try to wrap this up for the listener. The core message is, if you want to express the action of making something happen or become X, look for that powerful little end suffix on the base adjective or noun. Keep in mind the limitations. Not every word works, especially longer ones, but when it does apply, it's like a linguistic superpower for making your language clear and concise. It moves you instantly from just describing something to showing action.
That's it, exactly. It turns qualities and concepts into active tools for expressing change.
So now for that final thought, something to really take away and chew on. We've laid out the rules, the patterns, adjective to verb, noun to verb, and the exceptions. But knowing isn't quite the same as doing, is it? The real learning starts now, when you apply it.
Right. And this brings up a crucial question, really. We've given you the structural knowledge, but knowledge only becomes power when you actually use it. So here's a challenge for you, a practical one. Now that you're tuned into these concise on verbs, words like quicken, heighten, lessen, broaden, start paying attention to your own language, especially when you write. How often do you find yourself defaulting to a slightly weaker, maybe wordier phrase like make faster or increase the height of, when a precise on verb could do the job better?
Yeah, don't just spot them passively. Try to actively weave them in. For your next piece of writing could be an email, a report, even just a thoughtful message. Make a conscious effort to use, say, at least 7 different strong-on verbs. See how it feels. Notice if it makes your writing tighter, clearer, maybe more impactful. That's how you really internalize this, how you turn this deep dive into genuine mastery.
Exactly. Take that understanding of the structure and use it to actively transform your own communication skills.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the surprising power of the suffix chin. We hope it strengthens your English. Catch you next time.